The International Monetary Fund has upgraded its growth prospects for Sub-Saharan Africa, projecting GDP growth of 4.2% in 2025 from 3.6% in 2024. This is contained in its latest regional report titled Reforms Amid Great Expectations. The Lagos Business School at the Pan Atlantic University played host to the launch of the report, which featured a presentation of its highlights from IMF economist Athene Laws. There was also a panel session and Q&A session, which featured IMF African Department Deputy Director Catherine Pattillo. And Catherine Pattillo joins us right now. Catherine, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. We do want people to understand and appreciate the amount of work that goes into this report. Can you just give us a brief overview, the amount of people that worked on it, how much time it takes where you get your data, and so on and so forth?
Thank you. So this is a report that we do twice a year. And so immediately we finish one in the fall. We start on the process then of doing the other one. And it's a team in the African department, in our regional studies division, 6 to 10 people, also sometimes people working on other countries. And the data comes from a range of different sources. A lot of the data comes from our country teams then who get the data from the countries. And then we use, lots of other data sources, public data sources, market data sources. And actually, the data, I think, is a good value added of the report itself. A lot of people are interested in the data, and we make that data available on our website, both the raw data as well as the data underlying a lot of the charts and analysis.
Fantastic stuff. So very, very transparent there. Now, getting into the report, we were with you at the Lagos Business School. You talked about the delicate balance that a number of countries in the Sub-Saharan African region have to thread. Can you speak to that?
Yes, so the times are still really difficult for a lot of countries right now. And so we talk about this balancing act that policymakers are facing. And that is that they're working to still address macro imbalances, to keep up the progress that has been made already in reducing inflation, in stabilizing public debt, in building forex reserves. But they have to balance that then with the need for a lot of attention and spending on development, on education, on health, on social protection, because of the needs in the population and, of course, the growing population. And then they have to balance that also with trying to make sure that these reforms, which are much needed but often difficult, and again in difficult times, that these reforms are socially and politically acceptable.
Gotcha. Now, as far as the upgrade and the forecast from 3.6% 2024 to 4.2% in 2025, what informed that upgrade?
Well, we had a number of things weighing on the forecast this year, where growth was 3.6%, it's projected 3.6%, which is flat from last year. And you had climate shocks. You had a lot of flooding in a range of countries, including here. You had drought in Southern Africa that really affected growth, as well as hydropower and food security. And you had also those kinds of shocks in Eastern Africa. So you had the shocks. You also had power issues in a range of countries, and you had the impact of conflict and security, and also higher interest rates given high inflation. Now next year we're expecting that the impact of some of these would ease, right? So if the drought in Southern Africa then improves, you would have higher growth rate there. You also have big economies like South Africa, post-election, strong confidence, and improvement in some of the power outages that they've been having. So that I think is one of the factors that could improve growth for next year.
Now, one particular headwind to growth is inflation. And in fact, we actually just got inflation figures for Nigeria for October. It ticked up. Last week, we got inflation figures. Earlier this week, excuse me, got inflation figures for Ghana. That's also ticking up. But I mean, the South Africans and the Kenyas of this world, those are going down. But can you speak to the hurdle that is inflation and the challenges it presents for growth for the region?
Right. So, I mean, around the world, inflation post-pandemic really accelerated, and central banks around the world then, through increasing policy rates, have been on this battle to contain inflation, which keeps the cost of living really high. The same in Sub-Saharan Africa, where countries have taken steps. The central banks have raised interest rates, and this has had a lot of positive impact on containing inflation. So overall, then we see now inflation going down on average, but there still are countries, a third of the countries, where inflation is still in double digits. And half of the countries then have gotten inflation back below their targets, but that means the other half have not. And as you note, then, I mean, this is a headwind to growth, without stable macro environment, including stable prices. People are less likely to feel confident and save and invest. And it's also importantly, difficult for people, because we know that food prices, even when inflation goes down, food prices are still quite high. And this is part of the cost of living crunch that so many people in the region are facing.
Another thing in the report that's on there, and you mentioned this at the panel session at the Lagos Business School, debt. So can you also speak to the debt overhang and what that presents for the region as well?
So debt is quite high in a lot of countries, but we're not seeing sort of any kind of systematic debt crisis. We are seeing really difficult times with liquidity that a lot of countries are facing, where because borrowing costs are so high and debt is high, the ratio of interest payments that they have to make to the revenue that they bring in, it has doubled in the past decade. So this puts a huge squeeze on the availability of resources, again, for the important development spending that they need to, and populations are demanding that they do.
Now, there's new leadership in the United States, expected to be protectionist, which is suggesting that might have growth in inflation, which means the Federal Reserve might have to turn things around and start hiking rates, which is supposed to make the dollar stronger. In fact, I mean, looking at the things like the Bloomberg Dollar Index, the dollar has been appreciating. What does that mean for emerging markets, and particularly the Sub-Saharan African region, in your view?
Right. So we saw during an earlier period of record dollar strength that this has spillovers, obviously, around the world, particularly in emerging markets, and it did similarly in Sub-Saharan Africa. It tends to put pressure on currencies in the region, pressure for depreciation, and particularly at a time where, again, inflation is still coming down and still high in some countries, then this depreciation pressure can feed into further inflation. And it might also, when inflation is at those kinds of high levels, it might have even more of an effect. The impact also, is mediated through the FX exposures of countries. So impacts on balance sheets then, and the cost of servicing debt.
I want to get your honest assessment of the improvements on gender diversity on the region. What you've seen so far, and what can, what the region can work on to make it even better.
Yeah. So I mean, I have seen, and people that I talk to see also that, I mean, there really has been a lot of progress and indicators that are really important for people. The number of women, who die in childbirth, the number of girls pregnant below age 19, laws becoming more equal for women's access to property, and more women in leadership positions in both politics and business. So I think you have seen a lot of improvement, but it is true still that the conditions for women's and girls' full economic participation then face lots and lots of challenges. And some of those relate again to the legal environment, where we don't have laws that protect gender equality or they're not enforced. Financial access is still difficult. Education, where again we've seen progress then in the rates that girls and boys are going to school, but there's still more to be done. So I think a lot of steps, both in terms of eliminating some of these policy-induced distortions on the legal side or the tax side, but then also a frame where looking at policies that can benefit all, men and women, while including a gender lens to them so that they can help reduce gender gaps. And just, examples like, expenditure on water and sanitation, again, on education, on electricity. This is good for everyone, and it particularly helps women. Financial inclusion strategies that really target, where the financial access gaps are and might have specialized programs, financial literacy, or tailored services for women.
Now, final question for you. It's still on the gender diversity matter, but this is particularly in the African continent, getting more girls into STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. While there's the public policy side, which you've just illustrated a moment ago, there has been some talk that parents should be more involved in nudging their daughters in that direction. What's your view on that dynamic?
Yeah, so the issue is super important because, Africa's youth population is going to be the largest globally by 2030. So the demographic dividend then offers this really amazing opportunity for economic transformation. But to do that, to have that be positive, you need education, and particularly STEM education, given the developments in the global economy. And Africa lags behind in STEM education overall. Lots of estimates of the millions of jobs that are going to be needed in healthcare, in engineering, in IT, and then there's AI, where we know some things now and we don't know how things are going to evolve. So gender gaps then in STEM also make the problem even worse, because girls are much less represented in those fields. So you note that there are factors like the role of families and communities. I would say yes, that's very important. Ensuring that girls feel encouraged and feel they're supported, and that there are no stereotypes, and the role of mentors then showing girls this is a path. So that is important. But there's also then support to the education infrastructure in STEM overall. The need for labs and equipment and IT, et cetera, and that girls aren't disadvantaged there with the barriers that exist. And then overall, again, support to the STEM education infrastructure, research and development, just building that out. But I do agree with your point that the role of parents and communities and mentors is also really important, and something that can be done without money.
Right. Kathleen Pattillo, Deputy Director of the African Department at the IMF. Thank you so much for a very great conversation, also a very illustrative and informative report. And of course, we encourage all our viewers out there to download it from the IMF website. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.